and I don't want to be accused of putting words in your mouth, but it sounds like what I'm hearing you saying is that people who have disabilities are interacting with healthcare, seeking other kinds of public services, are proactively being offered MAID when they're seeking completely different services. Is that?
That is correct.
Okay,
that is what I am saying.
Well, folks, if you thought the last committee hearings we covered was worrisome, it's about to get worse, as we're going to be talking about what the government is trying to implement next year with the expansion of MAID. This topic actually was brought up on a bunch of different committees, and there's a lot of dark stuff to cover. So with that being said, let's dive into it. Now, as I mentioned, this topic was brought up in a few different committees, and the two main ones we're going to be taking a look at is the Finance Committee, which took place in early October, as well as a more recent one with Minister Patty Hajdu for Human Resource and the Status of Persons with Disability. Now, in both these instances, you will see Conservative member Garnet Genuis, who is conducting these questions. But we're going to start with the later one with Minister Hajdu, as he does reference the information that he's using in this questioning that he picked up in the Finance Committee back in October. So without further ado, let's take a look at this.
The UN has found that Track 2 MAID violates the rights of people with disabilities. Krista Carr from Inclusion Canada has testified that MAID is regularly raised with people with disabilities who are accessing unrelated public services. Inclusion Canada hears complaints about this on a weekly basis, according to their testimony before the Finance Committee. Are you concerned about Krista Carr's testimony and the UN's findings in this regard?
What I would say is that medical assistance in dying is a deeply personal issue, and certainly we have heard from the disability community their concerns around medical assistance in dying. We've also heard from many other Canadians about the need to have relief from irremediable suffering, and that is a
I guess, Minister,
balance.
if I can just add some precision to the question. Krista Carr's testimony was about people who have disabilities and are seeking unrelated public services. So we're not talking about people who are asking for MAID. We're talking about people seeking unrelated public services who are having MAID proposed to them, offered to them. And I wonder if you think that's acceptable.
So, Mr. Chair, my job as Minister of Jobs and Families is to make sure that people with disabilities have every opportunity to participate in society that people without disabilities have. So I'm responsible for the Accessibilities Act. I'm responsible for the Opportunities Fund.
But Minister, again, if I can just clarify, the issue we're talking about is people coming seeking other public services. So people interacting with government. Who have disabilities. And there have been reports repeatedly raised by Inclusion Canada and other stakeholders about people trying to access those services. And you, as the person who's supposed to be a champion for Canadians with disabilities around the cabinet table, I think should be seized with this. I mean, do you think it's a problem that people trying to access unrelated public services are having people representing government in positions of authority repeatedly offering them something they're not looking for in this regard? Is that a problem?
If there is a non-medical professional offering medical assistance in dying, then that would be completely out of scope for the legislation. This is something that is a deeply personal decision between a medical provider.
I'm glad you said that. I mean, because this is what Krista Carr has said at the Finance Committee.
Listen, I have no reason to doubt any witness. I would would like to know details.
Now, what's interesting about her saying she has no reason not to believe witnesses, she just needs more details, is this jogged my memory in regards to they got more details on this situation just late in October, as another committee hearing, which I know I mentioned we'd be taking a look at too, but this one was right on the money, and it was from Veterans Affairs. And I feel like it's important to play this because not only is this a Canadian veteran, but this is also another YouTuber here on the platform and a huge advocate to stop the expansion of MAID. And this is Kelsey Sharon. You may have seen her on her own podcast. You may have seen her doing some collaborations with people like Jasmine Lane. And she was at the committee, and this is what she had to say.
We came home to neglect, bureaucracy, and betrayal. And when veterans reach out for help, this government sends investigators, not healers. We're followed, watched, drugged, and not treated. And when that doesn't work, our system offers us death. I helped break the story when Veterans Affairs began offering MAID to this lovely lady right here on my show. You said it stopped. Fun fact, it hasn't. You're still offering MAID, still issuing now NDAs and payouts to shut us up. I know this to be fact because everyone comes to me privately. Over 20 veterans have confirmed been offered MAID, and I have the proof. And I have proof of more. Offering death to the people you sent to war is moral rot, and this government is full of it. It's betrayal of the highest order. And offering MAID to people with PTSD is absolutely insane. Research shows 46% of those with PTSD have suicidal thoughts alone, and 19% attempt suicide without even being offered. Instead, you threaten our benefits if we speak out. I know this because you send PIs to follow me around. And you threaten me in emails, and your own MP and your own Prime Minister has done it. I know this because I also have it in writing. Your silence with us is just bureaucracy and fear. And your Veterans Affairs Minister, a figurehead with zero credibility, blocks veterans online for telling the truth. I also know this because she called for a photo op with me. And when I said no, she began blocking my posts on social media for me calling her out for her hypocritical continued behavior.
Now, as I mentioned, she's been a strong advocate for this. She's been on Parliament Hill many times, talking in the press gallery, trying to get her point across. As you saw there, she was in the committee hearing. But even during this committee, a Liberal minister went to basically shut down what she was saying by emphasizing, well, this was only one individual, and trying to discredit it, but then saying, if there is more evidence, please let us know, even though she just expressed that it's people are getting NDAs or people are being told not to say anything, they're being threatened. So how can more information be coming out if you're doing the complete opposite to prevent this information? But just take a look at this lack of enthusiasm or even care, it seems like, kind of what Patty Hajdu had in her answer.
The purpose of this study is to examine suicide among veterans and to try to collect evidence in order to be able to make recommendations to prevent further instances of suicide among veterans. A fair bit of the testimony, or some of the testimony that we heard related to medical assistance in dying, which is not directly an aspect of this study, but some of the things that have been said in the opening statements is indeed extremely serious and extremely troubling. So I'd like to address that first, but I hope that I am going to be able to spend most of my 6 minutes on the actual subject matter of the study. What we know, what has been proven, what has been substantiated, is that there was one employee at Veterans Affairs who acted inappropriately in dealing with clients and client files and dealing with veterans and veterans files with respect to medical assistance in dying. At the time when that came to light, Minister Macaulay was before this committee. He profoundly apologized and he pleaded that anyone else with any information about any case, please bring it forward. It would be fully investigated.
So he's saying it will be fully investigating while also trying to downplay it by saying this was a one-time incident which was dealt with, but we have multiple different committees bringing up this exact problem. Veterans Affairs, status of persons with disability, and as I mentioned, the Finance Committee, because Krista Carr, who attended the Finance Committee in early October, was there to talk about Bill C-4, the Making Life More Affordable Act that the Liberals implemented that would cut focused on cutting the lowest tax bracket. She comes in and says that this is actually affecting people who are disabled because it affects how much money they actually make. And as she's trying to say this is what they can do, conservative Garnet Genius asks her, what is it like for people with disabilities? And just listen to what she says.
It's a pleasure to join all of you at the Finance Committee, and good to see the witnesses. Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Carr, could you just clarify one aspect of your testimony first off? Is it your calculation, therefore, that people living with disabilities will be net worse off as a result of this bill?
Yes, I think it's an unintended consequence of a bill meant to make life more affordable for Canadians. But as a consequence of that, yes, in a net position, they will be worse off than they are.
Okay, so it's not just that supports will be lost that partially offset the tax cut. It's rather that people will be net worse off as a result of this. Thank you for that clarification. This is something I know we've spoken about in the past. Have you engaged with the government on this request for a change, and what has been their engagement on this issue thus far?
We have engaged with all parties actually on this bill because we operate in a nonpartisan way, and we've had excellent response from all parties. And I do believe that Finance Minister Champagne did mention earlier this week that this is a recognized issue with the bill and that he's committed to finding a solution, which is certainly welcome news for us. But I think all parties have been very receptive and engaged on helping to trying to find a solution to this.
I wanted to ask you a bit about sort of the experience of people with disabilities in general, accessing public services, and also healthcare, other kinds of public services. It's important to me. I think it should be important to all of us that people have their dignity affirmed when they're accessing services and that they're treated equally. I wonder if you could just share, in general terms, how you would see the experience of people with disabilities raising issues or seeking public services, interacting with the healthcare system. How would you evaluate kind of how those experiences are based on what you're hearing from your members?
Well, I think in all transparency, I think since the bill was brought in around Track 2 MAID, which made people with disabilities the only group eligible for medical assistance in dying when they're not dying, that has certainly changed people's interaction with the healthcare system quite dramatically. People with disabilities are now very much afraid in many circumstances to show up in the healthcare system with regular health concerns because they're often MAID is suggested as a solution to what is considered to be intolerable suffering that happens to be caused by some of the things like that this committee addresses, like poverty and the situations that people with disabilities disproportionately find themselves in compared to other Canadians.
Okay, that's very striking, and I don't want to be accused of putting words in your mouth, but it sounds like what I'm hearing you saying is that people who have disabilities are interacting with healthcare, seeking other kinds of public services, are proactively being offered MAID when they're seeking completely different services. Is that?
That is correct.
Okay,
that is what I am saying.
Is that is that common? Are you hearing about that a lot, or is it weekly?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're hearing weekly complaints from people who live with disabilities who are seeking other kinds of services, and someone says to them, "Well, have you thought about MAID?"
Yes.
So I'm not quite sure if you heard what she said at the end there, but she just answered him with a straightforward yes. And so people with disabilities weekly are being offered MAID, even though they're asking for help that has nothing to do with medical issues. They're not going to the hospital. They're not asking for this or not asking for that. They're just asking for some sort of other assistance, and MAID is being offered to them. Because then at least they're not a burden to the system, to the medical system, to anybody else. We can just get rid of them, or they can get rid of themselves by opting to do MAID. And she emphasizes that the Track 2, which is what the government is trying to implement for March of 2027, has already been looked over and scrutinized by the UN and other groups, saying that they need to take a look at it and scrap it completely.
And what do you think we should do about that as legislators? Do you think we should try to stop government officials from proposing MAID to people who are not seeking it, who are seeking other kinds of supports and services?
Well, I think the disability community has made their case that we should repeal, and the UN CRPD committee has also affirmed that Canada should repeal Track 2 MAID completely. But I think in the interim, anything that anyone can do to limit this from being pushed on people with disabilities who are seeking support to live would be a welcome change. Probably not something this committee can deal with, but in your individual capacity as legislators, I'm sure you can.
I want to be clear that I agree with you about Track 2 MAID. Taking action in Parliament is a bit like building a house on a desert island. You have to build with what has washed ashore. So you have to work within what you think is realistic. And I don't think a majority of Parliament would share your view or my view on the Track 2 MAID issue. But it's striking to me that you're saying that in the current reality you have people that don't want MAID, aren't looking for MAID, but who people in the system, people in authority, presume should think about MAID, and people in those positions of authority are actually telling them that. And are people disturbed by this when they contact you? Is it a
Thank you, Mr. Dennis. That's your time.
Now, I gotta say, I'm not that surprised that Karina Gould didn't allow her to answer the last little bit of Garnet Genius's question there. But now we're going to start to get into the dark stuff that I was talking about, because as she mentioned, the United Nations Committee came out, which is the Committee on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, came out with recommendations, and they said that among the recommendations, number one bullet, Canada should repeal Track 2 MAID through repealing Bill C7 and repeal the 2027 expansion of MAID for persons whose sole underlying medical condition is a mental illness. So not only are they targeting veterans or disabled people, now they want to expand it to the mentally ill as well as mature minors. That's as young as 12 years old, according to some of these folks. And when you get into some of these other articles, Canada considers euthanasia for severely ill newborns, basically post-birth abortion. And when we go down, it says widening eligibility for euthanasia. Patients no longer need to be terminally ill, and by 2027, people with mental illnesses will also qualify. Parliament has also recommended extending access to mature minors. Again, we will get into that in just a second. Today, MAID accounts for approximately 1 in every 20 deaths in Canada, a rate that far exceeds that of other countries with similar legislation. Nearly 2/3 of the recipients are cancer patients, but other cases include those experiencing chronic pain, disability, or mental health struggles. So people that are just struggling with daily life, maybe they got a few aches and pains, maybe they just need more medication or they need better support, they are now getting MAID or participating in this and being eligible. And as I mentioned, when we look at some of the other articles, this was released by the Daily Wire in early November. Movement barrels forward to euthanize 12-year-old children in Canada. And when you scroll down, it says, there are groups now calling for minors as young as 12 years old to be included in the government-funded Ending Yourself program. One advocacy group called Dying with Dignity recommends minors as young as 12 be included in the program, and go as far as to suggest that a 16 and 17-year-old shouldn't even need parental consent to be offed by a doctor if they fit board criteria. This is just mental, folks. And Dying with Dignity has this on their website. If you go here, Dying with Dignity positioned on eligibility for mature minors. So it goes on to say that Dying with Dignity agrees that the existing eligibility should apply to mature minors, and that they had asked Parliament to amend the existing age requirement of 18 years to extend it to the persons at least 12 years of age and capable of making decisions with respect to their health. This is just nuts that this is what they're trying to put forward. And not only this, but what I found to be the darkest part of this all was this article or this study that came out called Government Economics for Expanding Canada's MAID to Vulnerable Populations and the Ethical Implementations of Allowing the State to Control Death. And this study goes on to say that this study explores the potential economic savings for expanding MAID in Canada, where it is currently the leading cause of death, to include vulnerable groups that cost the government more than they contribute to taxes. So this is breaking it down as this is a cost benefit to the government. The more people they off, the more money they save because it's less of a burden on our medical system. These groups include individuals with severe mental health issues, the homeless, drug users, retired, elderly, and indigenous communities. Both voluntary and non-voluntary scenarios were analyzed, projecting total savings of up to $1.2 trillion by 2047, with an estimated 2.6 million deaths in the voluntary scenario, mostly among the mentally ill and elderly populations. This cost savings measures raises significant ethical concerns. Financially incentivizing MAID could shift healthcare priorities away from providing necessary support, potentially devaluing vulnerable lives, and fostering a troubled reliance on the assisted death as an economic solution. And this was just from, I think, February of this year? Yeah, February 28th, 2025. So this isn't that outdated in the data, and they do break it down. It says there are many approaches to cutting Canada's healthcare costs and improving efficiencies, such as reducing redundancy and using open source software. However, several analysts have proposed killing patients as a cost-saving measure. They suggest that one potential benefit to MAID could be that reduction in the overall healthcare costs, leading to improvements in the healthcare system. They calculated that the introduction of MAID could alleviate healthcare spending in Canada by between $34.7 million to $138 million, surpassing the direct cost of implementation, estimated between $1.5 to $14.8 million. So this is all just a money saver. This is all that this program could potentially be when you break it down. And I've gone through this article. They even have, like, as you can see, they have equations for how they could calculate this. Over 5 million Canadians were diagnosed with mood, anxiety, and substance use disorders, with a total population of 39.2 million in 2022. This represents approximately 12.7% of the population who would potentially be eligible for MAID if the eligibility criteria were expanded to include mental illness, as has been proposed. And they break it down for the homeless, for the Aboriginal, for the elderly. Like, this article goes deep into it. If you want to check it out, I will definitely leave it linked in below. But this is a huge problem, folks. We should not be expanding this, and come, as I said, as March 2027, they're supposed to relook at this, because it was only put on pause when Mark Holland was still the Minister of Health. He had put the pause on it, said there needed to be more studying on it. But it seems like I don't really know where the studies are coming from. I don't know what they've looked at, what they're doing, and this is coming up. But with all that being said, let me know what you guys think about all this. I know it's not the greatest video to watch in the morning on a Sunday, but this stuff needs to be talked about. So let me know what you think about it, and as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.